What is up, guys? So, I'm starting to change my YouTube channel. So instead, I'm going to start doing Penguins videos on my YouTube channel. It's like about the Pittsburgh Penguins. So like every week I'm going to update you on how they've been doing. So yeah, I got my Crosby jersey on. I got this Penguins hat. So yeah, so here's my room where I will be posting all the videos. So look here, so we got this Penguins poster of a skate. Look, there's a little helmet up there. Pretty cool. Look, there's the Stanley Cup champions banner of all the years the Penguins have won. And look, we got all these accessories. So we got this, like, these little two little players here. Player and the goalie. We got the kid in the dryer book. We got a little Penguin Zamboni. Some Sidney Crosby Funko Pops. Stanley Cup. So yeah. Look, we got the Sidney Crosby Tim Hortons hockey stick. We got that Penguin stuffy. And then we got that Lego locker room. So yeah. And look, we got the Mario Lemieux poster. Hockey Superstars. And see, the room was painted the Penguins colors. So yeah. So I'm going to get into how the season has been looking for the Penguins lately. So yeah. So let's sit down and talk about it. Okay, so as you all know, if you're a hockey fan, you know that the NHL 2024-2025 season is already more than half over. And so the standings are getting crazy. The Washington Capitals have been like the best team in the league. Right now they're in second place overall. Right now the Winnipeg Jets are on top. And so there's a huge Eastern Conference wildcard race. There's like 10 teams that are still in it. And so, like, some teams have been doing way better this year than they did last year. You all know the Eastern Conference wildcard race last year at the end was mainly between the Pittsburgh Penguins, Philadelphia Flyers, Washington Capitals, and Detroit Red Wings. The New York Islanders are in it, but then they managed to secure that playoff spot. They got third in the Metro. Tampa Bay Lightning managed to secure fourth. And so, yeah. So the Penguins, it didn't look good for them for a while there last year. They lost a lot of games, but then at the end, it looked like they were trying to really make a push for the playoffs. You know, they won like 4 in a row, won that 7-game point streak, and then like they beat the Nashville Predators in their second last game, and then it came down where like they had 88 points. The Capitals and the Red Wings both had 89, and the Flyers had 87. So the Penguins weren't playing that day, so the Capitals were playing the Flyers for their last game, and the Red Wings were playing the Canadiens. And so the Penguins needed both the Capitals and the Red Wings to lose, and then they would have to win their game the next day against the New York Islanders. Well, the Montreal Canadiens were up 5-4, we're up like 4-3 in their game against Detroit, and they gave a goal with like 4 seconds left, and it went to overtime. I was so fierce. And then the Capitals managed to get an empty netter to secure a 2-1 win over the Flyers to get them into the last wildcard spot. And then the Penguins lost their game the next day to the New York Islanders, but it didn't really matter anyway because it didn't matter if they win or lose. So yeah, the opposite of what needed to happen happened. So now we're on to this year. The Penguins missed the playoffs for their second straight season, and yeah, it wasn't good. I was pretty upset. So I was even more upset because like Edmonton lost the Stanley Cup final. I really wanted the Canadian team to win, and they didn't. So now we're on to this season. So it's pretty tight between pretty much every team in the Eastern Conference. Almost every team. The Leafs, the Panthers are pretty much secured, and the Capitals, Hurricanes, and Devils, they're pretty much secured. And so it's pretty tight between the Columbus Blue Jackets, the New York Rangers, the New York Islanders, the Pittsburgh Penguins, the Philadelphia Flyers, the Ottawa Senators, the Detroit Red Wings, the Tampa Bay Lightning, the Boston Bruins, and the Montreal Canadiens. The team that's pretty much out of it all the way is pretty much the Buffalo Sabres. They have not been having a good year. They went on that 17-game losing streak. It hasn't been a good year for the Sabres. Ottawa have been having a pretty good year. I honestly think they're going to get in. Montreal, it looked like they were going to get in, but now they're pretty much fallen. Same thing with Pittsburgh. So yeah, so let's get into what Pittsburgh has been looking like this season. So the Penguins would have a pretty good preseason. They would go on to win like 4 in a row. They would beat Buffalo, Detroit, Columbus. And then they would lose their home opener 6-0 to the New York Rangers. Oh my God. And then they would go on to beat the Detroit Red Wings 6-3. And then they would go on to beat, then they would lose 4-2 to the Maple Leafs. And then they would go on to beat the Montreal Canadiens 6-3. And then they would go on to beat Buffalo 6-5. And then they would go on a 6-game losing streak, only to acquire 1 point against the Calgary Flames. And then they would beat the Washington Capitals. Then they would beat the Anaheim Ducks 2-1. Then they would beat the Canadiens 3-1. And then they would lose a couple more. Then they would go on to beat Washington 4-2. And then they would have that tragic 7-1 loss to Dallas. And then, and then they would lose 6-2 to the Blue Jackets. They would lose to the Red Wings. Then they managed to beat the San Jose Sharks 4-3 in a shootout back in November. And then they would lose 3 more in a row. And then, it wasn't good. And then they would lose 6-1 to Utah after losing 4-1 to the Jets, 3-2 in overtime to the Lightning after blowing a 2-0 lead in the third period. Back in November and October, the Penguins had those third period collapses. And it wasn't good. I used to get so pissed. And then, so then they lose 6-1 to the Utah Hockey Club. Crosby managing to score his 600th career goal in that game. Congrats to Sidney Crosby. What an amazing career he's had. And also, he's hit some other crazy milestones this season. In a game against the New York Islanders, he beat Mario Lemieux's assist records. Now, Crosby has the all-time franchise assist record. And then also he would also get the record for most faceoffs won in history. So now he's deemed king of the faceoffs. And then he would also, he did something else this year. I forget what it was. Last year he hit 1,000 career assists, and that was epic. And so, Sidney Crosby has been having a pretty good season individually. He's at 58 points in 56 games right now. He missed the last 2 games due to an injury. He got injured in their game against New Jersey the other day. So his injury is day-to-day currently. So So then after their 6-1 loss to the Utah Hockey Club, the Penguins would go on to win 4 in a row. They would go on to beat the Vancouver Canucks 5-4. They would beat the Boston Bruins 2-1. They would beat the Calgary Flames 6-2. Then they'd beat the Florida Panthers 5-4 after blowing a 3-goal lead in the third period. I was very pissed, but thank God Brian Rust was able to bail them out with that OT winner. That was a good game. And then so then they started winning more back in December. They would go on to beat the Leafs 5-2. They blow out the Montreal Canadiens 9-2. And then they would also beat the freaking LA Kings 3-2. They beat the Predators 5-4. Then they beat the Flyers 7-3 as their last game before the Christmas break. So They were having a pretty good time back there in December. They held on to 4th place for a while, staying ahead of the Rangers, the Islanders, the Flyers, even the Blue Jackets. But then the Columbus Blue Jackets they just got good out of nowhere. And now they're freaking in 4th place in the Metro. They've been in 4th place for almost a month now. So, so the Penguins would then, after the Whistles break, they would lose 6-3 to the New York Islanders, who were pretty much one of the worst teams in the league at the time. And then they would lose, but then they beat them 3-2. They had back-to-back games. And then they would lose, And then that's where all the shit happened. They'd lose 4-2 to Detroit, and then they would go on a 3-game OT losing streak against Carolina, Florida, and Columbus. After their OT loss to the Hurricanes, it would actually be in a playoff spot for a day. But then Montreal, that's when Montreal started doing well. So then it was very close between them, Ottawa, and the Habs. Detroit were still a little far out of it back then. And the New York and the Islanders, the Rangers and the Islanders weren't really doing shit. But then the Penguins were going to have a terrible, terrible January. My God. Their last really good game was against the Oilers. They would beat the Edmonton Oilers 5-3. Their first win against the Oilers since 2019. That was a great game. Crosby scored. And then after that, they would just freaking go start playing like shit. They would lose 5-0 to the Senators, 5-2 to the Lightning, 4-2 to the Kraken. It was crazy. And then they would go on their 7-game road trip. 7-game road trip. The longest one since a few years. And then they would freaking lose. So they win their first game on the road trip against the Buffalo Sabres 5-2, with Alex Nedeljkovic becoming the first goalie in NHL history to record a goal and an assist in a game. It was a huge moment for Nedeljkovic. I was pretty happy for him. The team was happy for him. It was crazy. And then they would lose 4-1 to the Washington Capitals. and then they would actually have a really cool win against the LA Kings, 5-1. And then everything just went to shit again after that. They would lose fucking 5-1 to the Ducks, freaking 4-1 to the Kraken, and then 2-1 to the Sharks. Like, they lost to literally the worst team in the league. And so it was just really weird. Crosby scoring in 2 of those out of 3 of those games. Yeah, Michael Bunting scored the goal in the Ducks game. So yeah. And then the Penguins would go on to beat the Utah Hockey Club 3-2 in overtime. Crosby scoring the OT winner. And then they would go on to get their first shutout of the season against the Nashville Predators. So congrats to Nelkovic, first shutout of the season. And then they would lose 3-2 in a shootout to New Jersey Devils. That was a really close game. I watched it. It was really close. The Penguins were like in it all the way. They managed to claw back from a 2-0 deficit and almost win it in the shootout. And then they would actually have a really good game against the New York Rangers. Like, they actually played really well in that game. They won 3-2. And then last night they played the Philadelphia Flyers. Sadly, they couldn't win that one. They lost 3-2 in regulation. Not good. But I don't really blame them for that loss because like I said, Malkin hasn't played in like the last 5 games, and Crosby's out after that injury against New Jersey, and now they're missing Brian Rust. So 3 key players on their roster, and also it was a back-to-back game, so like it's hard for a team to win a back-to-back game. So yeah, I honestly don't blame the Penguins for losing last night, and the fact that they were even able to keep it close, like managed to like stay in it all the way, was actually really cool. I didn't watch the game because I had my own game to play, so like yeah. So now the Penguins' current record after all that is 23-25-9. They are currently 7th in the Metropolitan with 55 points, being like 6 points out of a playoff spot right now. So, yeah. So a lot of people say the Penguins are a bad team. They're too old. They need to rebuild. And honestly, I don't blame them. I mean, they missed the playoffs the last 2 years, and it looks like they're going to miss it for the 3rd year in a row. And yeah, I mean, they were in it for a while there, and then they fucking started losing to all these bad teams, and it just got really bad. I mean, not all of them are bad. They lost to Tampa and Ottawa. They're pretty good teams. And so, yeah. So the Penguins are not in a good place right now, like, at all. And so, like, they need to claw back. I read on the website that the Penguins need to start clawing back. And, yeah. So, they're trying to retool, as the general manager, Kyle Dubas, said. They're trying to retool. So what he wants to do is he wants to draft young talent for the Pittsburgh Penguins. He wants to get them back into a Stanley Cup run within the next 2 seasons. And honestly, that seems very far-fetched considering their performance this year. Like, yeah. Honestly, a lot of people probably think he's crazy. I mean, but honestly, it doesn't sound too crazy because the Penguins actually do have a lot of young prospects coming up. You know, they got this Vil Koivunen guy. He won Rookie of the Month in the AHL. Then they got this new goalie coming up named Sergei Murashov. He has really good records in the AHL. The Penguins have already had him come to a practice. You know, they might use him next year. And they also have the most draft picks out of any other team in the next 3 drafts, 2025, 2026, 2027. They have 11 picks in the 2025 NHL draft, even managing to acquire a top 5 draft pick. So yeah, they traded Marcus Pettersson and Drew O'Connor to the Vancouver Canucks there over just like 2 weeks ago for defenseman Vincent Desharnais and Danton Heinen, who actually used to play for the Penguins last time they made the playoffs. After he was traded to Boston, and I guess he was with Vancouver there, and now he's back with Pittsburgh. So yeah, he seems to be doing an okay job. So yeah, and so is Vincent Desharnais. He seems to be doing a pretty cool job. So yeah, the Penguins might actually start clawing back. They seem to have a tendency to do this. They suck in the middle of the season, and then they just start winning a bunch of games, only to barely miss the playoffs. And it seems like that might be what happens again this year because they've won 3 of their last 5 games, acquiring a point in 4 of the last 5 games. So, yeah. And now they got a 2-week break because of the 4 Nations tournament. And so hopefully Crosby will be back for their first game back against the Washington Capitals on February 22nd. So yeah, the Penguins are 1-1 with the Capitals this year. The Penguins beat the Capitals back in November 4-2, and then the Capitals beat them 4-1. They're like on January 18th. And so, yeah. The Washington Capitals are a really good team this year, so I'm not sure if Pittsburgh going to win that one. But actually, the Penguins seem to have a tendency to do well against better teams. It seems to be what I noticed. I mean, at the beginning of the year, it looked like they would pretty much lose to everyone except for like the shittiest teams. And now, actually, this year they've beaten some really good teams. They beat the Capitals, like I said, and then they also beat the Kings twice this year. They beat the Leafs, and they beat the freaking who else did they beat? They beat the Canucks, who are now back in the playoff spot. They beat the Flames, who are still in the mix. And yeah, they beat the Bruins, who might end up in the playoffs. I'm so happy that they're not in the playoffs right now because I hate the Bruins. But like I said, Boston, they're not a terrible team. So yeah. But the team that I was really surprised to beat was honestly Washington because I did not think they were going to win that game, and they did. That was crazy. Sadly, they would have to go on to lose 7-1 to the Dallas Stars right after, which kind of ruined the mood. So, and they also beat Edmonton, like I said, and the Panthers. So those are two huge wins for the Penguins, beating those two really good teams, both of the teams that were in the Stanley Cup final last year. So, yeah, the Penguins actually play a lot better against better teams, like I said. I just watched them when they play a better team, and it's really fun hockey to watch. But now a lot of people trash their defense. Erik Karlsson and Chris Letang are too old to be on defense. And honestly, Letang and Karlsson are not terrible defensemen. Honestly, they've been doing their jobs. Honestly, Erik Karlsson, he hasn't been having a bad year. Last year, he made a lot of mistakes. And this year, he made some mistakes. And he makes some mistakes this year, too, a lot more than he should have. So, honestly. But he's not a terrible defenseman. I mean, he's won the Norris Trophy twice. So, honestly, he has to have some great qualities. I mean, he seems to be a more offensive defenseman. And he sets up some good plays sometimes. Honestly, the Penguins' main problem is their age. A lot of people say their age is too old, and it is. Their average age on the team is 30 years old. And so it's hard for them to manage to get back in time to stop a goal because they're just too old, they can't skate as hard as they used to when they were younger. And so most of the goals scored against the Penguins are exactly like that. They give up a ton of breakaways. And the players are just too old to get back, too slow. Most of the goals scored on the Penguins are because they leave open shooting lanes, they can't get back in time. And so I find that's how most of the goals against the Penguins are scored. So obviously their main issue is probably their defense and age. Definitely their age. So that's why they're trying to acquire some young talent in the draft. That's what Kyle Dubas said. They want to start retooling. They want to get Crosby, Malkin, Letang back to the Stanley Cup final, like they said. And so they want to draft young talent to surround the core. So back in a little few weeks ago, they said they were going to host a fire sale. And honestly, I think that wasn't a terrible idea, but then they dismissed it. They got a lot of good prospects in the AHL. Who I think could actually help them a lot. They also got Philip Tomasino. He's a good young prospect. He's actually helping out the team a lot. He scored in the New York game. He actually scored the game winner. And he scored it in the game against the Predators, also the game winner. So, 2 game winners in the last 5 games, which is pretty cool. And so, and I think he also scored a game winner in their game against Boston. As soon as the Penguins got him, they won 4 in a row. So I honestly think Phil Tomasino is just a good asset for the team. He's young. He's very skilled. He's a skilled player. And I honestly think getting him was a smart idea. And also, And now also another thing I want to talk about is they put Tristan Jarry on waivers. So another huge issue with the Penguins is their goaltending. Their goaltending is a huge issue. Because, Alex Nedeljkovic is not a bad goalie. His save record has actually gotten a lot better. It's now under 3, so he's no longer worse than the league. So it was 2.97 there in the last game, but because they gave up 3 goals, it might be back up to 3. I don't know. So the Penguins actually have the worst goals against average, they have the worst in the league of being 3.50. Yeah, that's really bad. And their plus minus is terrible too, -37 as of right now. Yeah, not good. Last year, they were able to maintain a positive plus minus throughout the whole season. So despite not making the playoffs, their plus minus was actually pretty good. They were +4 at the end of the year, 255 goals for, 251 against. So yeah, that was actually pretty good. Meanwhile, the Capitals, who did make the playoffs, had a negative 37 plus minus, and they were like the first team ever to make the playoffs with a minus 37 or more plus minus. So like, yeah. But this year, the Penguins plus minus is absolutely terrible. They've been blown out so many times this year. 7-1 to Dallas, 6-0 to New York, freaking 6-1 to Utah, 5-0 to Ottawa. Like, yeah, they got blown out so many times this year, and it's terrible. So that can really damage your plus minus. So yeah, they put Tristan Jarry down on waivers. So now he's back in the AHL because Tristan Jarry, he has not been having a good year. Like, honestly, they put him down in the AHL like right at the beginning of the year. They brought him back, and then they had to put him back down because he's just, honestly, he's ass. Like, he's just an ass goalie. Like, yeah, they want to develop him. They're saying that he's not done in the NHL, but honestly, I think he should be because, I mean, no, I don't think he should be. I honestly think he will improve over time, but he just needs like a lot more time in the AHL than he did there before. Because, like, he has not been having a good year at all. People even say in the comments in the highlight videos, the post makes more saves than Jarry. He's ass. And, like, I kind of feel bad for the guy. He hasn't been having a good year. And honestly, you could blame the defense, but honestly, he let in a lot of goals that he should have had. Because, like, goalies in the NHL need to make they need to make decent saves. And, like, there were some goals that went by him that he should have freaking had, and he didn't. So, yeah. But the defense is a huge problem too, because they got Matt Grzelcyk this year and freaking and they got Erik Karlsson last year. They still got Letang. They got rid of Pettersson for Vincent Desharnais, who I think is actually doing a decent job so far. So yeah, the Penguins are not the worst team in the league. That's far from it. Like I said, they've had a lot of rough patches, those losing streaks. But they actually do have some key players on their roster. Kevin Hayes, he's actually been doing a pretty cool job. He's scored in the last couple games, and freaking Tomasino, he's pretty cool. And they also got Blake Lizotte, who helps out. And Rickard Rakell is actually having a great season individually. Honestly, he has 25 goals as of right now, and so he's the team's leading goal scorer. And he was just put on Team Sweden's roster for the Four Nations face-off. So yeah, Rickard Rakell, he's a really good player, honestly. I think he's very skilled. And so I think he's a really good asset for the team. He goes really well with Rust and Crosby. Sadly, Rust, Crosby, and Malkin are out right now, and so it's probably going to be really hard for the team to win without them. But luckily, they get a 2-week break, and so by the time this Four Nations thing is done, Crosby and Malkin should be back. At least Crosby, anyway. But honestly, I think Sidney Crosby is probably going to have to miss the Four Nations because of an injury, which I think is actually good for him because he needs time to rest and really focus on the team, because the team's main goal right now is getting back into the playoffs. After that 3-game losing streak to three of the worst teams in the league, they just need some retooling. And so they would go on to win 2 more games after that loss to San Jose, then they lose to New Jersey, then they beat New York, and then they lost to Philly last night. Ugh, freaking Flyers. And so, but the Penguins are not done, honestly. People are saying, yeah, they're pretty much done. They're going to miss playoffs 3rd year in a row, and it's looking that way. Their chances of getting in are very, very, very slim. Probably a 1-2% chance at most. So, but honestly, guys, they did make a comeback last year and almost got in. So, with the way they played in New York and New Jersey, I feel like they could possibly make a comeback. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm just saying it could happen after last year. Because it's not like they're always the worst team in the league. Because they're far from the worst team in the league. Because their teams are way worse than them. The Blackhawks, the Sharks, the Ducks, the Kraken, the Sabres. And the Penguins are not the worst team in the league. Honestly, when they play well, they play well. They can actually keep it really close and entertaining with good teams, which is a huge, huge advantage for the team. Because how they played in New Jersey was incredible. They honestly should have won that game. Sadly, Nedeljkovic couldn't. He played awesomely in that game. He made some great saves in overtime. The Penguins were honestly all over the Devils in overtime. My God, it was a crazy game to watch. It's too bad they couldn't freaking finish it. But the Penguins, they played super well in that game against New Jersey. But sadly they had to go down 2-0, but they managed to claw their way back. And now they are in 7th in the Metro. So yeah, but they're far from the worst team in the league. They're far from the worst team. I mean, well, I wouldn't say far, but they're not the worst team because, like I said, the Sharks, they don't even have 50 points yet. I don't even know if they have 40. And the Blackhawks, I think they do have 40, but they sure as hell don't have 50. But Chicago actually have been putting together a couple more wins lately. But anyways, yeah, so the Penguins, when they play well, they play well. That's what I'm going to say. They actually have the team. Like, I honestly think they have the team to make the playoffs because, like, they actually do have some very key players like Rickard Rakell, Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, Chris Letang, freaking Brian Rust. Like Crosby's having a pretty good year. This could be the 20th season in his whole career where he has a point per game average. He has the record for most seasons in a row with a point per game average. Like, that's just crazy, bro. Like, crazy guys. And so the Penguins they're in a very bad place as of right now, 6 points out of the playoffs. And honestly, with teams like Detroit and Ottawa freaking winning games and Columbus, it looks very, very hard that the Penguins are going to get in. Like I'm saying, like, I hope they make the playoffs. Obviously, as a Penguins fan, like, that'd be awesome if they did. Seeing Crosby play in the playoffs again. But honestly, it doesn't look like it's going to happen this year. But I honestly think the Penguins will start making a comeback. I think they're probably just going to miss the playoffs again. I think they're just going to miss the playoffs again. Because there's too many teams that they have to get ahead of. And so they might get in. Like with some miracle, they might get in. But honestly, I think they're just going to barely miss the playoffs again. I think they're going to finish off 5th in the Metro, 5th or 6th. And yeah, I honestly have Ottawa getting in the playoffs. I honestly have Detroit or Tampa Bay finishing off 4th in the freaking Atlantic. And yeah, I have Columbus finishing off 4th in the freaking Metro. So I don't have Boston getting in, which is awesome because I hate the Bruins and I'm so sick of them always being in the playoffs because they never do anything unless they only make it to the second round when they play Toronto. Other than that, they're going to lose to anybody else they play in the playoffs. And so they always make it. It's so annoying to see them in there all the time. And I hate the Bruins. I freaking hate Marchand. And so the fact that Boston are having a terrible year makes me so happy. Happier that the Penguins probably won't be in the playoffs. So yeah, I really hope Boston don't make it. Anyways, guys. Yeah, so thank you for watching. I will keep you updated on more that happens to the Pittsburgh Penguins later on. So yeah, I'll be back after they're done with the Four Nations face-off. I'm actually going to go see the Penguins play in March. I'm going to go see them play Vegas and St. Louis. So I'll make sure to post my adventure on those games. Anyways, guys, thank you for watching. Please subscribe. I'm out.